Thank you. I'm going to be talking about jealousy and why it's a dangerous passion, but also a necessary passion. I think jealousy is an emotion, an evolved emotion that has a very clear set of functions, but it can also lead to tremendous danger. I'd like to draw your attention to this quote, the bottom quote from O.J. Simpson, who is now currently in jail. He gave this quote to a Newsweek reporter. He said, "Let's say I committed this crime, killing his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. Even if I did do this, it would have to have been because I loved her very much." Now, this is a very puzzling thing. He's saying, I killed her. If I did kill her, it must be because I loved her. So this leads to what I call the jealousy paradox, which is how can an emotion that is so closely tied to love lead to such extreme violence, which we know that it does. Jealousy is the leading cause of spousal battering, spousal homicide, and also other forms of psychological damage within romantic relationships. Now, prior theorists have tried to explain why jealousy exists, and most have attributed it to things like this: a character defect, neurosis, or a pathology. And in fact, in the psychiatric literature, there are many names for pathological jealousy: delusional jealousy, morbid jealousy. One of my favorite is the conjugal paranoia syndrome. See, if you're a psychologist, you have to name something a syndrome. It sounds more important. If you just said, well, pathological jealousy, that doesn't work. But a syndrome, that works. Well, I'd like to tell you a story, which is a true story, about a man who on Christmas Eve looked out of his living room window across the street, and he observed that his neighbor's Christmas tree lights were blinking in synchrony with his wife's Christmas tree lights. And he concluded that she was having an affair. His wife was having an affair. His wife brought him in to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist said, you have pathological jealousy. It's wrecking your marriage. You got to stop. Well, it turned out the wife was having an affair, and she was having an affair with that specific neighbor. Now, clearly there was a delusional aspect to the jealousy. There was no Christmas tree light synchrony as far as we know. But clearly the man was picking up on some very subtle cues that turned out to be correct. And the literature, the psychiatric literature, is filled with cases like that. People who have been diagnosed with pathological jealousy, and it's turned out that their partner has had an affair. That applies to both men and women. Now, one of the things about jealousy is that it's in part designed to guard against infidelity. And infidelity is cloaked in great secrecy. People don't advertise that they are having affairs. Okay? And as infidelity got driven underground, that created selection pressure for a psychological mechanism of jealousy to become increasingly sensitive to subtle signals that are probabilistically related to infidelity, but not necessarily related to infidelity. Now, when you think about it, so you have this secret thing, infidelity going on, and you have a mechanism which is relying on probabilistic cues, such as changing clothing style, failure to reciprocate and I love you, trying out new sexual positions. In this uncertain world, you have to make inferences, and there are two fundamental ways to go wrong. You can create a false alarm, that is, you could think an infidelity is occurring when in fact your partner is 100% faithful, okay, or you could fail to detect an actual infidelity that is going on. Now, my argument is that over evolutionary time, there's been a cost asymmetry between these two types of errors. It's like a smoke alarm in your house. It's better for false alarms to go off rather than to miss out on a real fire that's happening, either in your house or in a relationship. And this cost asymmetry, recurrent over evolutionary time, has created what we call an adaptive cognitive bias. That is, our mind is literally not designed to perceive the world or make inferences about underlying states accurately. It's adaptively biased to avoid the more costly error, which in this case is failing to detect an infidelity. Now, in humans, I think jealousy has a number of different functions. Okay, I mentioned preventing infidelity. It also functions to drive off mate poachers, those who are trying to encroach on your relationship. It prevents abandonment. Okay, so it's designed to preserve the integrity of the romantic relationship without your partner leaving it. It is also designed to signal love and commitment. Okay, so if you went to a party with your partner and you went to get some drinks and came back and found that your partner was kissing a member of the opposite sex on the couch, and you experienced zero jealousy, the odds are that you would not be in love with your partner. Okay? Those who have zero jealousy typically are not in love. And so displaying jealousy sometimes is a signal to your partner that you are in fact in love and committed to your partner. And also, for males, it serves a paternity confidence function. Now, let me just focus on that for a moment. Okay, the problem of paternity uncertainty. This is a problem that stems from the fundamental fact of human reproductive biology, and that is that fertilization occurs internally within the woman, not within the man. And so what that means is that women are always 100% certain that they are the mothers of their children. No woman ever gave birth, as far as I know, and as the child is emerging from her body, wonders, gee, is this child really my own? She knows that is her child. Men can never be sure. Some cultures use the phrase to describe this, a mama's baby, papa's maybe. Men can never be sure. Now, this leads to a prediction about a sex difference in the sensitivity or design of the jealousy mechanism. Namely, that males should be especially sensitive to cues to sexual infidelity because it is the sex act that jeopardizes that paternity uncertainty. Now, of course, men don't think about this consciously. They don't think, let's see, my paternity certainty will be jeopardized. That will impair my gene replication. Oh, that makes me really mad. No, they just perceive the cues and the emotion kicks in and does the job. Now, women, on the other hand, if their partner has a one-night stand, a one brief sexual fling with another woman, that by itself does not necessarily jeopardize what matters most. Okay, and what matters most is the loss of the commitment and resources and time and devotion of the partner. And so we had predicted that women should be more sensitive to cues to emotional infidelity, signs that the man is getting emotionally involved, because that emotional involvement is a good predictor that he will leave the relationship. So I'll give you this quick thought experiment. Okay, imagine you're a romantic partner. If you don't have a romantic partner, imagine that you have a romantic partner. And imagine that you discovered that your romantic partner was having an affair. And you discovered that not only had your partner become deeply emotionally involved with this other person, but also was having a passionate sexual relationship with this other person. Which aspect of the infidelity would upset you more? The sexual aspect of the infidelity or the emotional aspect? How many people would say the sexual aspect would upset them more? Say a show of hands. How many people would be more upset by the emotional aspect of the infidelity? Okay, well, it turns out there's a massive sex difference on this. Men much more sensitive, much more upset by the sexual aspects of the infidelity, women much more upset by the emotional aspects of the infidelity. And this has been replicated across cultures numerous times. It's also been replicated with physiological techniques. So we bring people into the lab, we put electrodes on them so we can measure physiological distress, increase in heart rate, electrodermal activity, frowning activity, and so forth. And then we get people, men and women. Now imagine your partner having passionate sexual intercourse with someone else. How do you feel? And when we record physiological responses, men get more physiologically distressed to the sexual infidelity. Women get more physiologically distressed to the emotional infidelity. Memory was discussed earlier. Men and women have differently designed memory systems. Men are much more likely to remember cues to sexual infidelity. Women more likely to remember cues to emotional infidelity. So literally at the attention to the cues, memory of the cues, ability to recall the cues, there are fundamental sex differences in the design of our cognitive system. Oh, could you go back, please, 1 sec? Thank you. Okay, now I want to turn to the topic of violence. And jealousy, as I mentioned, is the leading cause of spousal violence, psychological abuse in a relationship, and also spousal murder. Now, why would this be? Well, it turns out that even violence has a function. If you can think about mate guarding or mate retention tactics, there are two fundamental classes of strategies that you can use to guard a mate or to retain a mate. Okay, one is you can confer benefits on that partner, make them happy, fulfill their desires, and that will keep them in the relationship. But if you don't have the resources to provide benefits to your partner, you can inflict costs on your partner to deter them from cheating, to prevent them from leaving, and to undermine their self-esteem. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this has to do with psychological abuse. Our self-esteem in part tracks our self-perceived mate value or desirability on the mating market. So if we feel good about ourselves, we feel more desirable, and so our self-esteem in part tracks our desirability. And by undermining your partner's self-esteem, that undermines your partner's perception of their desirability and leads them to believe that they're lucky to be in a relationship with you and unlikely to find a better relationship elsewhere. Now, I'm not recommending this. No, I don't want anyone to say, well, I'm undermining my partner's self-esteem because Dr. Buzz said it's a good strategy. No, I'm not recommending that. I'm not recommending violence. But what I'm arguing is that this violence, physical and psychological, does have a functional logic to it. Now, some danger signs, these are known statistical predictors, so this can be something to take home, a practical message. If your partner, applies if the men are doing this. The men, if they don't want you to talk to other men, try to limit your access to your friends and your family, insist on knowing where you are at all times, or undermine your self-esteem. These are statistically related to a higher probability of violence happening in the relationship. Now, I realize I'm running low on time or out of time, so I'm going to very quickly say that jealousy is related to homicidal ideation and to actual murders. I'll just actually mention one. Men get very violent here. When we've done studies of 5,000 individuals, ask them, have you ever thought about killing someone? And who do people think about killing? They think about killing mate poachers. They think about killing partners who have dumped them. They think about killing partners who have been unfaithful to them. So this is one example. He was a very good friend, and he told my paranoid fiancée that I'd been unfaithful. It was a pack of lies. Then he made a move on her. That's a classic mate poaching tactic, by the way. Okay. How did you think of killing? First, I would break every bone in his body, starting with his fingers, puncture his lungs, basically give him as much pain as possible. Now, women also have homicidal fantasies. Does Kate Moss have them? I don't know. She wasn't in our study, but one woman had a homicidal fantasy about Kate Moss. My boyfriend is always telling me how gorgeous he thinks Kate Moss is. Really, she's just a skinny, drug addict bitch. The method, I thought about taking a wire coat hanger and putting it through her eye to make her brain dead. Then I would hang her skinny body up in my closet and show my boyfriend that she's not so gorgeous after all. Well, most people do think about killing partners and mate poachers, but since I'm out of time, I just want to draw a couple conclusions here. And, oh, there we go. And I want to revisit the jealousy paradox. Okay, and just to sum up, jealousy is a signal of love. Sometimes it's evoked strategically to increase a partner's love. We find this in our studies, especially women, sometimes intentionally evoke jealousy in their partner. Jealousy functions to protect a love relationship from infidelity and abandonment. It's psychologically configured somewhat differently in men and women because they have to solve somewhat different adaptive problems. but it's also simultaneously a dangerous passion leading to adaptively patterned violence, and it's something that we have to watch out for in our relationships. Thank you very much.